On today's Locked On Giants podcast, we hear from Rick Serritella of NFL Draft Bible about the quarterbacks, the sleepers, and the potential Giants bets in this year's draft. That's coming your way next here on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all my written work. And as always, welcome on into my Blue Crew community members, my everydayers, my newcomers, and everybody in between. Thanks so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And on today's show, I'm pleased to welcome in a good friend of mine, Rick Serritella. He is with All Access Football, does a great job scouting the draft prospects. He's very well versed in all that. You can also find some of his work at NFL Draft Bible. Rick, my friend, welcome on in.
How we doing, Patricia? Always love coming on, chopping it up, and talking football with you.
Yeah, this is becoming an annual tradition. I mean, you always bring it. You always have some great insight that nobody really ever talks about. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say about this year's draft class. And Rick, we got to start the obvious spot for the Giants. Quarterback. What are we thinking about this quarterback class?
Well, Patricia, I knew this question was going to come up, and I thought about it. And I think as a longtime observer of the team and just this new front office regime, I guess it's not so new anymore with Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, I feel like they've lacked conviction and vision. And let me explain. So they came on board. Daniel Jones probably had at least 50 starts under his belt. This guy, Brian Daboll, who was supposed to be the next Mikey McDaniel before Mikey McDaniel, comes in and says, you know what, we're not quite sure if he's a franchise quarterback. Okay. So they go into the year and they have an evaluation year. They come out of that year and they determine that he is a franchise quarterback, or at least they pay him accordingly. And then after a year, they blow up that plan. And now it just seems like a team of desperation, right? And they seem so desperate now, whether it's Stafford or Rodgers or trading up and, lacking the vision and being in the position to have the number one overall pick. Listen, John Mara would not have been the first owner to march into the office and give direction orders to lose that week 17 game. Now you've got to give up more equity to get back to a spot where you already were. And I think what it comes down to at the quarterback position, right? They now have to decide with conviction and the vision what they want to be. And I say that because if you want to put a Band-Aid over the wound, well, then Aaron Rodgers is your option, okay? He'll get you back to a competitive level of football. Is Aaron Rodgers going to win you the championship? I don't think so, not at this stage of his career. Now, they've seemed to show a lot of interest in Shedeur Sanders. And so if they have a conviction that he's the guy, I don't care what it costs, you've got to get the quarterback right now because this regime is playing for their job. They don't have an extension window where they can, the problem is, and it's a long-winded answer, there's not a lot of blue chip talent. There's not a lot of foundational building blocks. This is not a team that's a quarterback away. If they blew it up and brought in a new regime and a fresh start, they'd have a runway of a year to do like the Detroit Lions model, build from the inside out. And it's a great draft to do that. But they've put themselves in a position where if Schoen and Daboll don't win immediately, they're going to be out the door. So they have to get a quarterback. And it starts with the leadership up top. I'm saying above Joe Schoen, the owner has to be more conviction and vision. And it has to start from the top down at the biggest, most critical position in football. And that's what they have to decide here.
Rick, I want to talk about the draft prospects at quarterback. But before I do, obviously free agency is coming up. The Giants, it seems like some of their options might already be drying up. Stafford went back to the Rams. It sounds like Justin Fields is going to stay with the Steelers. Sam Darnold is supposedly working out a deal with or trying to work out a deal with the Vikings to stay with them after they didn't tag him. What are the best veteran options do you feel for the Giants maybe that Band-Aid or that short term or that, Kurt Warner role that Warner played years ago when Eli came over.
Yeah, I mean, you have Rodgers, you have Russell Wilson, and you have Kirk Cousins, right? And those are pretty much your three options right now. And so if you're not sold on those guys, you got to go get yourself a rookie guy. And, that's just the reality. How much of an upgrade is Russell Wilson over Drew Lock? That's what you have to ask yourself. And how much more are you willing to pay? And Drew Lock has a pretty team-friendly salary cap. So I think those options are drying up. I wouldn't be surprised to see Justin Fields land in New Jersey, just not with the Giants. I could see him fitting in with the New York Jets as a great fit. Okay. Do the Giants want to, getting into a bidding war for Justin Fields? How high is that price tag going to get? So I think those are kind of the free agent options, and you have to assess where do you rank Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, and how much are you willing in draft equity now to give up, because you're at number 3 to move up to number 2 or even number 1. Most likely you're going to have to give up a 2026 first round as well.
You mentioned Kirk Cousins. He's still under contract with the Falcons. Would you make a trade for him? And if so, what do you think he's worth?
I mean, at that salary, you're probably looking at like a day 3 mid-round pick at most. I can't imagine a team wanting to take on that type of contract. But at the same time, again, we talk about desperation. The Giants aren't the only team desperate at the quarterback spot. The Las Vegas Raiders are looking for a quarterback. According to Indianapolis, they're looking for a veteran guy to come in and compete with an Anthony Richardson. We just mentioned the New York Jets. So there's a lot of unsettled quarterback positions around the league, and that, drives. I mean, look at the price that the Giants and Raiders, they drove up the bargain price for Matthew Stafford for $100 million. Now, he took a little bit less, I think $90 million or so. You probably know better than I do, to remain with a competitive team rather than go start from scratch at the twilight of his career. And probably a smart move, because Los Angeles will make it up in endorsements and winning ball games and to that effect. But I mean, this is a complicated decision, and it's probably the most important decision the Giants will make in the next 10 years.
All right. Now, Rick, I want to talk about the college quarterbacks. And before, we open this up a little bit more, I want to get your take on the top of the quarterback class. Basically, it's Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders. Some people have thrown Jackson Dart into that. Give me a quick synopsis of what you see from each one, and who is the best option for a quarterback needy team, and specifically the Giants system.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think in terms of system, when you're drafting a rookie signal caller, you got to build a system around the skill set. That's what good coaches do. They adapt and adjust. They don't try to fit the square peg into a round hole. Hey, this is our system. This is what you need to do. No, you've got to take that signal caller and put the weapons in place and build a system around him. And I was shocked at first when I went down to the Senior Bowl to just talk to the front office executives and gauge how much Cam Ward is ahead of Shedeur Sanders on most boards when you talk to people around the league. And that continued in Indianapolis, and it seems like Cam Ward's the consensus number 1, but I've watched every snap of both of these guys. I'm a Shedeur Sanders fan. I think he's an assassin. I think he's mature beyond his years. You could talk about the off-field antics, but I think a lot of times now the media is kind of blending his off-field interests with incorrect label of his personality. And I think there's nothing that Shedeur Sanders can do right in the media's eyes, which is fascinating. But to me, this guy can make all the throws. He's a smart decision maker. I know he's been criticized for holding on to the football too long, and that's fine, because I'd rather have sacks than interceptions. And that's going to come with development. This guy had an atrocious offensive line. He never had a running game in college, and he turned around 2 programs, Jackson State and Colorado, who were both bottom of the barrel. So to me, I have Shedeur Sanders 1, Cam Ward 2. And, again, I went back like New Year's Day. I went and watched all their touchdown throws. And if you were to ask me like, hey, Rick, can you make a highlight reel of the top 10 throws you saw out of all the touchdowns thrown between Shedeur and Cam? At least 8, maybe all 10 of the plays might come from the Cam Ward highlight reel, because there's a lot of splash plays. But in terms of consistency, it's Shedeur Sanders who I thought showed up week in and week out. And I would say Cam Ward has a little bit of EJ Manuel to him, where you're going to see those wow throws. You're going to see him roll out and just, boom, flick a laser on the 50-yard line, rolling out to his left in the back corner of the end zone for a touchdown where only his receiver can catch the ball, and you're going to say, holy mackerel, I want that guy. But I think when you stack them up truly and compare the whole body of work, I'm a big Shedeur Sanders believer.
Hey, Giant fans, you probably have heard of Chewy. They really do have everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy. When you're shopping for food, treats, or even pet health care, Chewy makes it fast, easy, and affordable. With over 100,000 products from all your favorite brands, Chewy has everything your pet needs, from foods and treats to toys, beds, and grooming. And it's not just for dogs and cats. They've got supplies for birds, fish, reptiles, and small pets too. Chewy makes it easy to manage your pet's health with prescriptions, telehealth visits, and even in-person vet clinics rolling out nationwide. And with auto ship, you never have to worry about forgetting to order the essentials for your pet. My little dog here, Macy, loves her chicken jerky treats. And thanks to Chewy's auto shipment feature, we always have plenty of goodies on hand for my little fur baby to enjoy. Right now, you can save $20 on your first order and get free shipping by going to chewy.com or clicking on the link shown in the description. Minimum purchase required. New customers only. Terms and conditions apply. See site for details. All right. Now, that being said, Rick, there is not a big consensus that, Shedeur's going to be the guy, Cam's going to be the guy. When you stack those guys up with the Travis Hunters, the Abdul Carters, where is the best value? If you're the Giants, you're sitting at number 3 and you have basically your choice. Which is the way they should go? Should they maybe defer on the quarterback and look at the next group?
Well, I think the front office situation kind of factors into this decision. And typically, I'm a believer in BPA, best player available. And I think when you start drafting for need over your BPA, that's when you get into trouble. However, the exception to the rule is the quarterback position, because if you don't get that right, then you don't have a quality contending team. Like if you look at the common denominator of the teams that went into the playoffs, 90% or more have a quality starting quarterback. So it's tough because the Giants are sitting at 3. We don't, nobody anticipates being this high in the draft again, but they have been picking at the bottom of the draft, and they don't have a lot of blue chip prospects to show for it other than Malik Neighbors. I mean, where they've done a terrible job of drafting. They just don't have a lot of young talent. But I do think they have to get the quarterback right at all costs because of the situation that they are in. And I don't believe, even if they sign a veteran guy, like we mentioned, an Aaron Rodgers, a Russell Wilson, I don't believe those are the long-term answers. You get a year, it's a year rental, right? And then it's maybe a handoff, kind of like when we saw Eli come in. They had Kurt Warner. Warner started the first few games, handed it off to Eli. I think that's what you might see. But in terms of just building the best team, well, that would say, to me, Travis Hunter's the number 1 player. Abdul Carter's my number 2 player. If one of those guys is on the board at 3 and you signed Aaron Rodgers and you want to go that route, I can understand it. But you're going to just understand a year from now, you're going to be in the same exact position at the most critical position.
What about the second group of quarterbacks? The Jalen Milrows, the Kyle McCords, the Howards. I mean, what do you like about that group? Who stands out to you about that group?
Jackson Dart, I guess, is the one guy that has shown me some flashes. I was higher on Dart coming into the year. I thought he could really catapult himself. And then I was kind of disappointed with his subpar performances in big time spots. And to me, that's one of the things I look for in future NFL quarterbacks, top competition, big time moments. How did he perform? And I would compare it to, a Will Levis type of performance where he wasn't able to get Ole Miss. Like if you look at this draft, Ole Miss is going to have, outside of Ohio State, probably more players drafted than any school in the country. Well, what happened? They lost 3 games. You would think that with that type of talent surrounding you, you would get more out of a Jackson Dart. But I was pleasantly surprised with his frame, which is thicker than a Riley Leonard. He can take hits. He can make all the throws. Most importantly, he can extend plays. Now, I'm going to say something wild right here, Patricia. Like, I would not be shocked if Jackson Dart went inside the top 10 because of how much needy quarterback teams there are. And it would not shock me. Now, I don't see him in that fashion, but it would not surprise me. If I were to roll the dice on one of these tier 2 guys, Will Howard gives me Mason Rudolph vibes, so I'm not sure I want to roll the dice with that. Quinn Ewers has been hurt every year since sophomore year of high school, every single season, so that concerns me with him. The one guy I do like is Jalen Milroe for the upside. He's a raw passer, much like Lamar Jackson. He's got incredible speed and scrambling ability. And if you can groom him for a year or two, I think Jalen Milroe has as much upside as any quarterback in this year's draft. And one other guy I want to mention who worked out yesterday. In fact, I didn't get the report, so I'm not sure if he worked out at the pro day, but Curtis Rourke from Indiana had a fantastic season. And the Hoosiers medical staff kind of mismanaged that ACL injury he had. So I don't know what the medical report showed in Indianapolis. But if you want to just kind of redshirt a guy in the late rounds and see what materializes, Curtis Rourke out of Indiana is not a bad, 6'4" pocket passer, make all the throw type of guy to want to develop.
Now, Rick, besides quarterback, the Giants basically have needs across the board. Some of them starters, some of them just step matters. I want to talk about interior defensive line, which I see as a huge need. That's a very deep class. What can you tell us about that class as far as guys who would ordinarily have a first round grade go in the first round, but because of the way the class is stacked, might be available day 2, day 3?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it at the top of the show. It's a great year to need players inside the trenches, especially defensive tackle. I mean, this class is loaded. Mason Graham, we haven't talked about him. Some people view him as a top 5 option. He didn't work out at the combine. He got knocked a little bit just for his body frame and measuring in a little bit, maybe undersized. And, one guy who might be hanging out in the second round when the Giants come back around is his teammate, Kenneth Grant, who's a big athletic freak, 2-gap run stuffer, can get after the quarterback a little bit. So Grant might be a day 2 option for them. Walter Nolan is going to probably go pretty high. Derek Harmon will be off the board. Shamar Stewart, some people like him at edge. But when you get into that day 2 range where I think the Giants may look to address this, Tyleek Williams out of Ohio State, an excellent run stuffer for the national championship Buckeyes, played phenomenal this season. Joshua Farmer from Florida State, I thought had as good of a get off and a quick first step as anybody down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. I was really impressed with Joshua Farmer. I think he's a top 50 pick. And one guy who's just, if you plug in this guy next to Sexy Dexy, Cam Jackson out of Florida, this guy is a monster truck at 363 pounds. And, kind of like the kid that Tennessee drafted out of Texas last year. His name is slipping my mind. But he's a similar kind of people pusher, monster truck in the middle, space eater, and just a rare blend of size and athleticism. I've never seen anything quite like it, actually.
What about cornerback? That's another big need for the Giants. Are they better off going veteran route for that one, or are there some prospects in here that can legitimately be a CB1? Because right now, Deontay Banks hasn't shown that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if Hunter falls into their laps at 3, that could be an option, right? That would be great because he could also provide a boost on offense. Jahdae Barron, I mean, this is a guy I love, the Thorpe Award winner. He's in the first round mix. In terms of cornerbacks, probably day 2 for the Giants. Does Will Johnson out of Michigan slide? I mean, there's a guy whose draft grade has fluctuated. Some people see him as a first-round talent. Some people are concerned about the injury. We'll see where he lands. Trey Amos out of Ole Miss. This guy, to me, pound for pound, after Travis Hunter, I think he's as good as anybody. He's physical. He plays man coverage on the boundary there. He's got great size. And so I have a first-round grade on him, but he may not go until day 2. And if you want a couple mid-round guys to keep an eye on, Patricia, take a look at Dorian Strong out of Virginia Tech. This guy, I mean, I don't think he gets enough credit just in terms of his size, physicality, man coverage again. and Noah Williams out of California, who was just moving and operating at a different pace at the East-West Shrine Bowl. Noah Williams, he had a bunch of interceptions this past year. I think he had 8 interceptions for that Cal football team, because you see that cat-like instincts, the ability to bait the quarterback, jump that route. That's Noah Williams out of California. He could probably be had in the 3rd round. And I think he's a guy that's going to compete for a starting job at the next level. So this cornerback class, we didn't even mention guys like Caleb Ransell out of Tulane, Zah Frazier out of UTSA, in the mold of a Tariq Woolen, Zai Alexander out of LSU, if they want to go back to that Tigers wishing well, who shows starter capability, just lacks consistency. And then a guy like Kobe Bryant in the slot out of Kansas. I thought he was as good as any slot cover corner. O'Donnell Fortune out of South Carolina, he worked his way up from the Hula Bowl to the Shrine Bowl, was the East-West Shrine defensive MVP out of South Carolina, and that's a late round target to keep an eye on.
Rick, what about receivers? Now, I've read that the receiver class isn't as deep as it's been the last several years. The Giants, if they lose Darius Slayton in the free agency period, they're going to have a need for a wide receiver too. Jalen Hyatt has not taken that step that I think they were looking for. Is there a solid prospect in this draft class that maybe can develop into that wide receiver too, to take some of the onus off of Malik Neighbors?
Well, you said it. The wide receiver 2 is, I think, what a lot of these guys are viewed as. And I think maybe the wide receiver class gets dinged a little bit for their lack of star quality. But I mean, I think it's very talented and deep. Like a Luther Burden from Missouri is a great slot receiver. You have Emeka Ibuka from Ohio State, maybe not as highly rated as some of these other Ohio State receivers, but a guy, again, you're looking for a wide receiver too. This guy's going to probably hang out for the next decade in the National Football League. If I'm the Giants, I'm looking at guys like a Trey Harris, okay, out of Mississippi, who was hurt. We just talked about Jackson Dart. His go-to receiver was Trey Harris. And this guy, he can be a possession guy. He can take you deep when needed. He's got some physicality to his game as well. A little bit of injury issues this past season, which can make him slide into that day 2 range. But in terms of talent, he's a day 1 grade for me. Jack Beck from TCU, can't say enough about this young man. He made plays all week long in the Senior Bowl, had the walk-off game-winning touchdown in the Senior Bowl, has battled through adversity. Of course, his brother was shot down there in that New Orleans shooting. He played over there at Princeton right here in New Jersey. And then how about a late-round flyer on a guy like a Tez Johnson out of Oregon, who ran a disappointing 40 time at the Combine. But, I mean, if you try to cover this guy, you just can't. I mean, he's just so elusive, so like a dart, his change of direction. It's hard to stick in his underwear and stay in his hip. So Tez Johnson, to me, I thought he might be a day 2 guy. He ran, I think, 4.52 at like 5'7". So that's going to probably put him in the day 3 range. And one guy who didn't work out at the Combine, Patricia, was Xavier Restrepo. And this guy is maybe the best route runner in this year's draft. There's a lot of questions about his time speed. He didn't work out in Indianapolis. I think, that might dictate where he goes in the draft. But if you're just looking for that slot kind of route runner, Wesley Walker type, Xavier Restrepo is that dude.
What about some of the other spots where the Giants have needs? You could talk about running back. Offensive line is a big one, obviously. Safety is probably another area where they can use some depth. Edge rusher. Where are some of the strengths in those areas in the draft class, and who are some of the prospects you see as a potential fit?
Yeah, listen, I think I like the running back class. I think it's a great year for running backs, and I think we'll see at least 2 in the first round with Ashton Genty out of Boise State, Omarion Hampton out of North Carolina. I'm not sure at this point who is going to be the first running back off the board. I know a lot of people think it's Genty. Wouldn't shock me if it's Hampton. I like this kid Dylan Sampson out of Tennessee. When you talk about size, burst, a nose for the pay dirt, this guy finds the end zone almost every other carry. It seems like a threat to take it the distance anytime he touches the ball. How about Cam Scadaboo? Like, where's he going to go in the draft? If he's just hanging out at the beginning of day 3, Like, would he be beneficial to that Giants quarterback situation? Like, let's hand the guy 20, 25 times to Cam Scatterbu and alleviate some of that pressure off of the quarterback position. And I guess you could state a case for Caleb Johnson out of Iowa and play that same role with the size and the durability and the ability to run between the tackles. You want to move over to offensive line. Giants need help up and down there. You talk about day two potential guys. How about Emory Jones out of LSU? I thought he was, a lot of people talk about Will Campbell, the left tackle, and where will he play at the next level? But I thought Emory Jones really solidified himself again in Mobile during one-on-ones. He's going to be a great plug-and-play right tackle right out of the gates. Jalen Travis, speaking of Princeton, I had a chance to go scout that young man a couple of training camps ago. He actually transferred over to Iowa State this past year, and you could see it out there at the combine. He got with that Power 4 weight training program and cafeteria that they didn't have maybe at Princeton. He's gotten bigger. He's got good agility. He's got great experience. Obviously, he's very smart. And then Carson Vincent out of Alabama A&M. This guy was a late add to the Senior Bowl, has maybe the longest wingspan of any tackle in this year's draft. And out of Alabama A&M, I don't care if you take the helmet off. It didn't matter who he matched up against, SEC, Big Ten. He held his own. I'll touch base on some guards here. Gray Zabel out of North Dakota State. I think he sneaks into the back end of the first round, but I would have no problem with the Giants selecting him in the second round. Gray Zabel is a plug and play. Some people like him at center. Some people like him at guard. He started at tackle for the North Dakota State Bison. So Gray Zabel, I think, is a player to keep an eye on. Joshua Gray from Oregon State. I don't understand why nobody is talking about Joshua Gray. He's a borderline first round guy for me. He might not even go into the third round based on what I've heard. Maybe I'm looking at something wrong, but Joshua Gray out of Oregon State would be a definite target for me. Connor Colby out of Iowa is a guy that's well coached up, brings a ton of experience. And, the center class, it's not locked and loaded, but Drew Kendall out of Boston College is my top guy. Jared Wilson from Georgia is not too far behind. Jonah Monheim from USC, probably 1, 2, and 3 guys there in the top 50, top 75 equation.
All right. Now, final question for you, Rick. I know you're still putting your grades together, your final grades together, but when you look at this draft class, how many legitimate first round draft grades are there in this class, and maybe some surprise names that maybe people aren't talking about?
Yeah, well, it's a down year in terms of, those true traditional cornerstone players. And I would put, I'd put Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter probably in that category, and then a drop off. And in terms of how many guys would be first round picks, no matter what year, no matter what draft class, typically in the past, and doing this, I think my 23rd year now, I found on average, there's usually 12 to 16 guys a year. I think it's a little bit lower this year, Patty. I think, there's probably more 8 to 12, maybe 10 guys that I would put into that category. And what I would say is from the 20 to 50 or even 60, those 20 to 50 guys are so evenly closed. I mean, that's why you can see a lot of surprises in the first round, such as a Mike Green out of Marshall, transfer from Virginia with some sexual allegations that he discussed very openly at the combine. I mean, he could be a potential top 10 guy. James Pierce is as volatile as they get. I've heard he could go top 10. I've heard he can go day 3. I heard he's been removed completely, entirely off the boards due to character concerns. Teddy Buchanan out of California. You want a dark horse round 1 candidate nobody's talking about? Watch that guy's film. He's a small school transfer, makes a bunch of tackles behind the line of scrimmage, used as an occasional blitzer. I would put him into that category. There's so many. I could sit here and we didn't talk about tight ends, and I love the tight end class. Tyler Warren's a top 5 talent to me, but when you talk about Mason Taylor, the nephew of Jason Taylor, he would be a great fit for the Giants if he's hanging out there in the second round. And then even in the middle rounds, like a Mitchell Evans out of Notre Dame, you talk about the pass catch and blocking ability of a Mitchell Evans. You saw it in the college football playoff. And, unfortunately, the most disappointing combine performance probably hailed from Bowling Green tight end Harold Fannin, who I was expecting big things from. He's probably a late round flyer, day 3, maybe a 7th round pick. If you want a pass catching weapon, kind of a boom or bust day 3 guy, Harold Fannin would be somebody in round 7 if he's still on the board. Just throw into the equation, H-back weapon. The Giants need some weapons, however they can get it right now.
Yeah, for sure. They have a lot of needs. And of course, free agency will start next week, and we'll see how that maybe shapes things up. But certainly the areas that they're weakest in, I think right now, with the exception of quarterback, I think there's enough talent to be had in those various positions. So that being said, Rick, my friend, always great to have you on the program. Always appreciate your insight. He is Rick Serritella, and you could find him at All Access Football, NFL Draft Bible. Good stuff. Check it out. Giant fans, I want to thank you for tuning in to the Locked On Giants podcast. Always a pleasure to have you with us, and we will see you again tomorrow.